Good evening. I'd like to call the Program and Personnel Committee meeting of District 128 to order. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation. Thank you. I'm just going to review the agenda here real quickly. We're going to have an invitation for public comment. We'll have communication about the D128 school safety website. And then for discussion, employment of employees, some educational tours, school report card highlights, community education program, Title I review, the 2023 superintendent goals, and then a discussion of the IASB resolutions committee report, which looks like you all have come well prepared. And then follow that up with any future agenda items, and we will adjourn at that point in time. So any thoughts, adjustments to that agenda? Everyone good? Okay, we'll move on. We have open for invitation for public comment. Anyone wishing to address the committee? Mary, anything on the email?
We do not.
Okay, we'll move on. First up here is the D128 school safety website.
I shared with you the links to the school safety website. It's when it becomes active, those sublinks will be part of the main site of school safety. So right now it's not active on the page. I mean, it's kind of hidden, but when you go to the main school safety webpage, then there'll be like subheadings for communication where it is, facility safety, safety drill, safety team, and community resources. So any questions on?
Or minor typos. Do you want me to just email those to you or?
Yes, and the one on community resources, a couple of the links got fixed, and we spelled out the exact name of the websites that they were linked to.
Thank you.
Okay.
So.
I just have two. Can I tell you what they are?
Sure.
On the main page, it says meets regularly. It should read meet.
Okay.
And then on the facility safety page, it says school resource officers monitors both LH, and it should read be monitor and collaborate.
Got it.
But I mean, in terms of content, I thought everything looked good.
So you say the links will be live. I will get that done tomorrow morning. And so then there'll be links and then there'll be subheadings to all of this.
I had a super quick question. I noticed that there are links and or phone numbers to both the National Suicide Prevention Line. There's a link to the bullying incident form. There's also a link on that community resources page to the Illinois Court Services website. And then there are about 6, 7 on the bottom there, including see something, say something, but don't we have a district hotline as well for reporting potentially incidents, like an anonymous?
We have the district, the bullying harassment form. So that's our form and it goes right. And that can be anonymous. So they can, you know, that goes to both schools and myself.
I thought there was also just something more general to report safety issues for students that was anonymous. I could be misremembering, but I feel like even when I've been walking around the buildings or even in the bathrooms, there's like a sticker or a poster that says something.
Well,
just
that could
about,
be the QR code that goes to that.
oh,
to that.
maybe.
So the QR code goes to that bullying incident form.
Okay.
So if you go to the QR code, it'll bring up that Google form that we have created.
So if a student has a tip, a piece of information, something that they'd like to report to district administration, and they don't want to do that in person, they just want to provide that information anonymously, is there an avenue by which a student can do that currently?
On the bullying incident
Oh,
report
it's
form.
all under bullying?
Yeah, so,
Okay.
so we get all sorts of different information underneath there.
Okay,
So,
I
yeah, they-
apologize for,
No, they can just
being
go to that
redundant.
one, they can go to the one QR code.
thank you.
Anything else? I know some schools call it like a tip line or something.
Right.
We call ours a
That might
tip
be
line,
good for us to investigate is.
what we
a little
call
more
it. Yeah,
generic
yeah.
Naming, yeah.
Okay, nice job. Now on to the discussion items, employment of employees. Have a personnel report here that we'll vote on in next week, actually. Any questions or comments on this?
It's nice to see a recent LHS grad employed by the district. That's terrific. Why is Sam Zabatsky being replaced by 2.6 FTE instead of 0.5? I just didn't understand that.
So he wasn't a 1.2, but I think there were some other changes in how some of the allocations of the FTE were done.
Okay,
So,
so that's correct.
yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on that? Move on to educational tours. We have 3 listed here. Any questions or comments on that?
Yeah, that first one. Do we have an itinerary for that one or has it been changed?
Yes, so it's
Oh,
been
it has been.
uploaded. Yes, sorry.
Okay,
It was a mistake.
because it was only the budget before, but now I see it.
The
And-
budget form is excellent. Thank you.
It's a great
I'm
idea.
glad you like the updates. It took us a while and Dan helped a lot. And it's taking time for everyone to get used to it, but I do think it's helpful. We do have, in our ed tour procedures, we ask folks to submit the ed tour request in a timely manner. Sometimes it doesn't happen. We can be a little more firm about that if you'd like.
I was just wondering what it was, because normally we get them beforehand.
That would be my expectation too, is that before we post them, that we have reviewed them. I mean, like if you didn't get it before we went to print with this agenda, it shouldn't be on.
No, I did get it. It's just that when it was uploaded, the budget sheet was only uploaded. The itinerary and the ed tour
Oh,
request
I
was
thought
not
it wasn't
uploaded.
submitted, so.
Yes. Mhm. We did
Okay.
review it.
So just as long as we know, and there's going to be random cases where you find out at the last minute, somebody goes to state or something, or for some, recognition that you don't know quick enough to bring it through the board cycle. We understand those too, as long as there's a process for that. But you're right, it's just delay in submitting it or don't get the paperwork in on time. That's not a good thing either.
Yes, and I'll make sure that
Yeah.
they're submitted and uploaded appropriately.
Any other questions or comments on all those?
I have
Carol?
one small thing. I was looking at the itinerary for the Model UN trip. And honestly, this is coming from a place of actual true curiosity, but they have an item on this itinerary from 12 a.m. to 4:30 a.m. that's called Midnight Crisis Session. And I just want to know what that is. And it sounds intense. And I just want to make sure, it aligns with our daring mission being up for the wee hours of the evening.
Yeah, so this is something that the state affiliate and the national organization put together. I can find out more details about what exactly that entails and bring it to you next week.
I'm sure it's nothing nefarious at all. And someone in our audience, I think, may even have an explanation.
Yeah, it's part of the conference. They have a midnight one and all the big tournaments. But something actually happens big in the world and like they have to wake up all the UN. people.
Oh, it's like kind of
Simulating.
simulating. Ah,
The situation room.
yeah. So the kids are up like middle of the night. Oh my gosh, that must be, I bet.
I
Okay,
bet it
it sounds wonderful then. Forget what I said. Thank you.
A good catch, though.
It's the way it's phrased. It's like midnight crisis session. And I was like, this sounds,
Yeah, like the shooting-
I don't know if I'd want to be there. Yeah. Thank you.
crises don't just happen in central time zone.
I
you know,
guess not.
during the day, yeah. Interesting.
I prefer simulated ones
Yeah,
over
that's true.
actual.
Yeah. That's true too.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments on those? We'll see those on our agenda next week. School report card highlights.
So I just wanted to put tonight's presentation in context. Last month, we shared data and information that was not on the report card. Tonight, we're going to give the highlights and just remind you how to navigate it, but we'd like to give the bulk of the presentation next week at the formal board meeting because more people watch. But we wanted to take advantage of tonight as a touch point. So Yesenia and Charlotte are going to be giving an overview and orienting you to where if you want to go deeper and also maybe asking some questions on what you'd like us to focus on during the deep dive next week. So I'll turn it over to Yesenia and Charlotte.
Okay, yes, thank you. So this will, as Denise said, just be a very quick overview of some of the things that stood out to us in reviewing our report card data. And then next week, we will do a deeper dive into especially academic performance data, as well as a few other areas that are of interest. So the main report card website is illinoisreportcard.com. And Dan, if you just want to click on that link, or the picture is also linked. So when you click on that, it takes you to a search and you can find any public school in Illinois. So we can find District 128, we can find each school, you can find any other school you want to look at. So from this search, you get to what's a landing page that they call the snapshot. So these are screenshots of the snapshot page for the district on the left and the two schools in the middle and the right. And the snapshot pages are a little bit different. There's slightly different information posted for the district versus the schools. Sometimes the information is similar. And Dan, if you just want to click on any one of those pictures, it'll open up another website. So it's actually very nicely laid out. There's tiles. You can click on anything. And then on the side, if you click on anything on the side, it opens up a whole bunch more info. So there is a lot to dig in here in the report cards. And in each page, so many things to look at. So we will, again, just be giving some highlights tonight. You can go to the next slide. So the summative designations are something we wait on the edge of our seat each year to receive. And this slide shows us how the summative designations are determined. So in high school, there are 75% of the score coming from academic indicators, and you can see the 5 of them listed there. There are also a little more info on the next slide when we get there. And 25% from school quality and student success indicators. If you are curious why number 9 and 10, college and career readiness and fine arts are kind of grayed out, those indicators are not going to be used until 2025. So they're kind of there because they will be part of this summative designation, but they are not being used currently. So if you look at the pie pieces, you see that there are 8 pieces of the pie, not 10. Eventually there will be 10 pieces of the pie.
Are those new designations or were they used before the pandemic?
So they were used prior to the pandemic, but many of the indicators have changed. So there have been some changes over the years to how it's done and some of the weights, but the summative designation has existed since I believe 2018. And then it stopped for a few years.
Okay.
So we are back to it now.
Okay.
Do you happen to know if fine arts is still going to be part of that 25% of school quality as opposed to academic indicators?
The way that I've seen the graphics done, it seems that way, but I don't know that for sure. I can look into what the breakdowns will be in the future. You can go to the next slide. So this is another view of it. Same thing we just saw, just with the pieces of it put into the pie. So you see that the 50% of our summative designation is based on our graduation rate. And then we have 25% in other academic indicators and 25% in those other indicators. Just for reference, this year only, our science score is based on participation. Normally that is based on performance and proficiency. This is only participation. That's this year only. And in case you do not know what ELPTP stands for, that is English Learner Progress to Proficiency. And to go into all of that, we would be here much later than anybody wants to be here this evening, but there's a lot that goes into just that little 5%. So happy to report that both of our schools achieved exemplary status for their summative designation. So the 4 designations possible are being shown on the slide. Exemplary is what we have achieved. And this means that we are in the overall top 10% of schools in the state. We have to have a graduation rate higher than 67%. And this is an important one, no targeted groups, which means that we have a student group who is at or below the all students group for a school in the bottom 5%. So that is looking at student groupings and ensuring that our student groups are on somewhat of an even keel. You can go to the next one. So we're very proud of our schools, of course, for their exemplary status. So a couple other highlights, just a few things I pulled out. I pulled out the racial and ethnic diversity. I think this is an interesting one for us to be aware of, and especially how it's changing. This slide is only showing 2022 data, but you can within the report card dig in and see how is our racial diversity changing over time. And these are important things for us to know, especially as we need to make sure we're paying attention to our various student groups and ensuring that they are successful along with our overall population. So graduation rate, this is another highlight of the report. So the graduation rate that shows up in the square is for the 4-year graduation rate, but the state also tracks our 5- and 6-year graduation rate. So on the right side, you are seeing some graphs where the yellow bars represent the school, the light green bars represent the district, and the dark green bars represent the state. So you can see a little comparison there. And the top graph is 4-year graduation rate, then the middle one is 5-year, and the bottom one is 6-year graduation rate. So we do track that up to 6 years for graduation. And this is Vernon Hills graduation rate, 95% for their 4-year. And again, you can see their 5-year and 6-year as well, and compared to district and state. Another really important indicator is the 9th grade on track. And 9th grade on track means that students, 9th graders, have earned at least 5 full-year course credits or 10 semester credits and have earned no more than 1 semester F in a core course. This is hugely important because freshman on track is a key predictor of high school success. Students who finish their 9th grade year on track are almost 4 times as likely to graduate from high school as students who are not on track. So this is something that we want to pay close attention to and really look at this data as it comes out. So LHS had a 98% 9th grade on track rate. And if you look at the demographic breakdown there, really some positive things in terms of gaps in some of our student groups. We see a couple of small gaps, but nothing really glaring. So that's a very positive thing to see and something very encouraging on that report card. This is Vernon Hills on track, 9th grade on track screen. They have a 97% 9th grade on track. We do have a couple of student groups in there where we do see a gap. So that's something for us to really focus on. Our Black or African American students and our Hispanic students, we're seeing a bit of a gap there in comparison to the overall group, but still a really good ninth grade on track rate. I wanted to highlight some of the non-academic things as well. So this is information from our climate survey. There is a lot going on in those images, but basically you can look at the deepness of the color. So the darker purple, the more our climate survey tells us we have implemented that in our buildings. So we have some areas here where we see we can work on, and we have some areas of positivity as well. Over to the right side where you see some yellow, there are our participation rates. And we did really well with student participation. Our teacher participation is something that we need to work on. So for LHS, we only got 54.1% of teachers, and for VHHS 66.7%. So that is an area where we really want to hear those teacher voices. So to brainstorm, find some ways to motivate them to complete that survey so that we hear their voices and can do something about the things that they want us to know.
When do teachers and students fill out that survey?
So this comes in, we have a window, and I think we normally do it around February. So it's a window of time we get to do it, and we normally give it in February.
And do we provide
We
both?
provide
with
class
time.
time. So that's why our student participation rate is high. We do set aside, we go to a special schedule, and there's a chunk of time for all students to take it.
Do we have an opportunity to set a time aside or set time aside for teachers to do the same thing? Or is that just something that we want them to do in the regular course of work?
I think many of them also do it during this time, but that's one question we need to ask the teachers.
Yes, that's something we, in our recent panorama survey that we put out, we also had a relatively low teacher participation, and we did want them to fill it out while their students were filling it out. But if teachers are feeling like they need to really be supervising or not feeling like they have that time, I think we can brainstorm some ideas on the survey team for how we can better manage that, because we do want to hear their voices. And this is something I just want to preview. We will dive deeper into this next week. This is something new on the report cards. This will be on a district report cards. This is not for individual schools. It's for the district overall. This is the equity journey continuum. And this is, as I said, a new feature, and it's an informational tool that helps us track our progress toward closing gaps in achievement, opportunities, and supports. Through the lens of equity, the tool analyzes a continuum of district level data points to make that data more useful for improving outcomes for all students. So we'll do a deeper dive into this next week, but I wanted to highlight it this evening because it is a new piece, and it's really important for us to be looking at this, especially as we are really on an equity journey and have a team really working on that piece. This shows us where we are now and where we need to keep going. So I think this is just an important piece to highlight, and we'll do a little bit deeper dive into what that all means at next week's meeting.
Can you tell me what pieces, what data do they use to come up with?
So this is not any new data. They take data that's already reported and put it onto this continuum. Next week, we can go deeper into exactly what that is. There's different things that they look at for student learning conditions, and elevating educators. There's different measures that are things we already report that go into those pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So next week, there will be a full report that will really outline that. But I just wanted to give a preview because I think this is a really good and interesting thing that's been added to our report cards.
Just for one example, suspension rates are one of the measures that's used under the header of learning conditions. And if they're disproportionate, that is where the large gaps come from, versus minimal gaps would be stage 4. That's not the only thing that's under learning conditions, but what they've done is clustered some of those key attributes and put them in an equity reporting fashion. So it helps us know the direction we're going. But we'll make sure all of those sub scores are available to you.
Yeah, I had the same question for that.
Me too.
Here's lots of data there, but it really, you know, you look at it, the journey continuum. It implies all the work we're doing at equity, we do tremendous amount of work, equity related work in the district that isn't necessarily reflected in those individual data points on student achievement and whatnot. That's not important, that's important data, but there's so much more to it. So when I saw this and using existing data, it's still confusing. How would they know exactly how to address it effectively?
Again, they won't know our plan on how we're addressing it, but what they'll be doing is looking at the results. What's our attendance rate? And is that similar between our groups? What's our discipline rate? You know, those kinds of things. It'll be up to us to navigate our plan that we're doing in our equity and inclusion plan. But they're trying to make sure on a comparable scale across the state, we're looking at indicators of equity. And I think for this first year, I think they're also talking about adding a few more as we get more clarity and as we come out of the pandemic. So I think this will probably continue to grow over the next few years. In terms of that data, we will be making sure we're one step ahead of the state in knowing what this data is. You know what I mean? But because we've reported all this data for a long time, but didn't know the state was going to be looking at it this way. So we'll make sure this is on our top priority list internally, but then also for our equity plan, what other data do we value? That even though the state isn't counting it in here,
Right.
we want to use that as an indicator of progress. So we'll make sure we're very clear with you on that. This is something that's also on the equity continuum. And here's how we're going to use it. And here's something we're doing in addition to the equity continuum to measure our progress.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Can you guys out there hear okay? Can you hear all of us? Good.
I had one more, and I think Denise, you were going there, but you know, we've looked at equity data from the panorama survey. We're looking at things here. So it would be nice to see how all these jigsaw puzzles come together eventually and where the synergies are versus where the disconnects are. I think that would be nice to look at in reference to here's the collective data versus here are the actions.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And I think it's important to note as well, the data that was used to put this particular graphic together is from 2018-19, and that is due to the pandemic. And so not really having a complete picture of data. So we know we have made great strides in the years since then toward equity. So I anticipate seeing these grow in the future. And we know we are moving in that direction. So
Can I ask a question? So if we know the measures, the individual measures for each of these that will give us context of what they're considering, student learning, learning conditions, and elevating educators. If we know what those measures are, is there a way that we can prepare something that would compare 2018 to today using those same measures?
yes, I think so. Yes, yes.
I don't know if the state has published all of the details of their formula. But that's one of the
Yeah.
things that sometimes they have a secret recipe. But I think we could come close to simulating what they're using to place us a certain place, or at least because we have the raw data. So at least mirroring some of those things for the data that we have for this year's students.
It's a good idea, Cara.
So that is all for the highlights that I have this evening. Next week, we will be looking much more in depth at our academic performance data, mainly SAT. That will include a disaggregation of student groups, which is really important for us to be looking at, especially as we continue talking about equity. We'll do a deeper dive into the equity journey continuum and any other key findings that are relevant, we will share. I am preparing a full report for next week. So there will, of course, be a presentation, but there will be a full report that really deep dives into the things that we can't fit into a short presentation. But if there are other things that you would really be interested in seeing or hearing about, you can absolutely let me know. I will definitely look into the equity journey continuum even further and make sure we have that available. And if there's anything further, please let me know and we'll make sure to include that.
Yeah, I would encourage everyone to play around with the report card. There's so much data there that you can get to and look and compare and look at trends over a period of years. It's fascinating. You can
And it's
get down a
surprising-
rabbit hole for a long time with that data.
And it's surprisingly user-friendly for somebody who is not a professional educator. I'm sure for many of you who are, the data is even more meaningful, but I think it's very user-friendly and digestible. And I think we have a lot to be proud of.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on any questions or comments on the report card? No. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on, community education program.
Yeah, so I did include a memo in the board docs for just some background information on community education program. So one of the things, with our strategic plan, with our mission vision, is that we want to look at our existing programs in the district and how do those programs align with our mission, our vision, and then also look at the resources that are being allocated to those programs. Is it appropriately being allocated? So, background of, community education. This again is mainly geared toward adults in the community. It's been a long, standing program. It has evolved over the years. We offer it throughout the year with our main programs being the fall, winter, spring, very little being offered in the summer. Classes are generally offered at our buildings. There are some offsite locations. We have partnered with some online programs as things have progressed. I think that, I think people were looking for avenues even during COVID to be able to take classes. We partnered with Destinations with Nadine, which is a travel experience that is open to people from different communities. So those are some of the highlights of what, is offered in our community. However, over time, the number of people in our community that are taking community education courses has really declined. It was declining, I think, a little bit before pre-COVID and has declined a little bit, obviously a lot more. If you really look at the enrollment, now the enrollment of those classes, and we don't have a way to look at the data and determine, of 1,200 people taking it, is that 1,200 people or is that 800 people, what that is. But really, when you look at that, that's a very small percentage of our taxpayers between the districts. And even then, out of those 1,295, they may not all be District 128 taxpayers. So, looking at what we spend for that program, and again, majority of our expenses are with, salaries, benefits, and some purchase services from the website for the community ed program to publishing. That's a majority of our costs. There are costs for instructors, but generally, if there is a class running I'd say that it costs $100 to pay the instructor for the course. The course will run, and if there's enough people to cover the cost. So our courses are really covering the cost of the instructor. But if you really look at that deficit of 200,000 is due to all those other fixed costs in there. I don't see that changing. I don't see us, being able to, charge more for these classes because we just don't offer enough courses. So like the magnitude of our courses, we'd have to offer a lot more courses, I think, to recoup it. So that's why when we look at our recommendation is to work with our local communities on transferring some of these better attended courses over to them. We have been talking to Vernon Hills Park District a little bit, and they actually took a couple of our classes and instructors and ran them because they're able to, I think, just run some of those programs a little bit better. But we've talked to them about if we were to give them I think access to more of our instructors, access to our buildings. You know, for example, for, you know, the village of, you know, Vernon Hills or Libertyville to run a cooking class, they may not have the facilities, but as you'll see tonight, we have facilities, you know, in our classrooms that we could open up, you know, facilities where they could run it and we can, through our intergovernment agreements, give them space. We're already doing this with our pools. We're doing this with, you know, some of our fields and some of our other spaces. So we've had some initial discussions with both Vernon Hills and Libertyville. The other one, I need to go back and touch base with the library district. They offer a lot of other programs. So I think there's a lot of crossover, and if we're able to give them some of our resources, that maybe that actually might better serve some of our adults in our community.
The
So,
library offers a ton of online
correct, yes,
courses. I'm not sure if the Park District, I think, is still primarily in person,
yes.
and we could support them with facilities, but the libraries offer both in person and a wealth of online resources as well.
Yeah, and so the village of Vernon Hills obviously has a park district, and it's a tax, you know, part separate
body.
from the village. Libertyville does not, but they have a, you know, one of the departments is the park district, and they have talked to us initially about, I think, expanding some of their programs. So, you know, we would like to work with them second semester. So we would like to continue offering on a limited basis some of our programs second semester. And then during that time, because we're not doing any planning for our own classes in the future, that our staff would be working with the villages and the library on transferring, you know, those classes, talking to the instructors and trying to get them hooked up with all these programs. You know, so our recommendation is to, you know, discontinue the program at the end of the school year, basically, you know, towards the end of June. Continue the classes that we're going to publish and offer so that we have a continuation and we can work toward a continuation with both villages. And I think that could help serve our adults in the community.
I found this information very eye-opening. You know, I appreciate that you have identified other venues for adult education that are out there in the community. Because our job is to educate students, and the money that we have been entrusted with by the taxpayers needs to go to fulfill that mission. You know, I recognize and I do not underestimate the fact that we'd be taking away, you know, service we provide to the community. But again, our number one job is to educate the students, and that is where our money should go. So I support the trajectory that you've recommended.
It's $1 million every 4 years. So just to say that out
A lot of
loud,
money.
so that we know what kind of money we're talking about, that's a lot of money to serve 1,200 people.
Can't-
Do the instructors or any of the participants have any idea that this is in the works?
Well, I don't think, so the people running the program have, we've had discussions with them. I don't think down to our participants know yet. And so once we look at kind of a timeline and what that is, then we will go back and be sending out information and having discussions with some of our longtime instructors and trying to map that out.
But again, we wanted to have this conversation with you because that would be a different message if we're ending it versus we're transferring these programs to this
Right.
agency or that agency or any of the courses that had this, like you said, our most popular ones. So that's one reason why Bryant, Dan, and I wanted to target end of May, you know, end of this year. So it would give us time to do that communicating in a very positive way and do the transfer of the most popular classes.
I
So-
did have some questions. So I guess I didn't understand, and I'd ask you to explain to me. I was trying to figure out from the budget. So we have a $211,000 deficit, but you said if there weren't enough participants in a class, that class wouldn't run. So where is the deficit? Where's the deficit coming from?
That we're not building in cost for all of our costs just to run that individual class. So if I am teaching a class on poetry and you're gonna pay me $500 to teach 5 nights of poetry, you just have to have enough enrollment to pay the $500. We're not covering all of the other costs that we have for the director, the assistant, the website, all of those things.
Printing of
The
the
publishing
catalog
of
that
the
comes through.
catalog, yeah.
Twice. Okay, so because I get from a financial, purely financial status, this is a loser, right? And this we could definitely. But so we've already started but my concern is we're going to be asking for a 5% increase in our property taxes. In our tax levy, and we are going to now reduce services. So I want to make sure that we are committed to continuing services to people who have been relying on it as, even though it's 1,200, however that is, and make sure that we are assisting to make that transition and make it still available.
And that was our goal, because we'll still have staff then, you know, that second semester, and, you know, I'll be working with them on, you know, reaching out to our communities to try to get some of our better attended, you know, classes on the books with either Vernon Hills, Libertyville, or, you know, possibly libraries. So,
So those two full-time positions, are those district positions?
yes. Well, one's full-time and one is, like 29 hours, so just under really technically full-time. Those are the district positions.
I have a question.
Yep.
When we think about like our peer districts, is this, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to speak with anyone, but is this kind of across the board a trend that neighboring districts are seeing, that their adult education programs are just kind of fizzling over time?
There's not, you know, from the high school standpoint, there's not a lot of high schools that are running like adult education programs.
I
but
think
they-
Stevenson does a
so-
big one,
So
right?
they incorporate it
Patriot
too with
Recreation.
prep and with their, a lot of other things, I think, to help their overhead costs. You know, so some of their like summer camps and stuff like that is all kind of incorporated
Mhm.
together. And so then when you look at that monies, I think they're able then to cover their overhead costs, whereas our program is strictly adult education, so we don't have those other, I guess, avenues of, I mean, could you run the program and make up that deficit? Yeah, but then you're gonna be charging how much per these classes, and now you're gonna market people out of those classes. And then you'll just be back to square one, because now you'll have nobody taking the classes because it's becoming astronomical to.
We
So
we
it-
did look into some of the other programs that are successful, and they're much larger than
Yeah.
ours.
So
211, 214 have very vibrant adult ed programs, but they're also yeah, 6 high schools and things like that, but they're also very targeted for some of their minority. They're
Mhm.
like the adult EL program is huge in District 211. So it's going and actually targeting some of the needs that have been identified in the
Right.
community beyond special interests.
And we
So,
do have College Lake County right here too, which offers a lot of, you know, courses for adults too. And with EL, we had another entity that offered an EL program in Munline, and we are running it at Vernon Hills, and all we're doing is giving them facility and classes. We advertised it, and so we have some of our community members, adult, you know, taking EL classes at night. And so we, you know, we're doing some other things without us really spending any money on it. We're offering up facilities, because as you know, facilities are hard to come by at a lot of places for classroom and other types of facilities.
So it sounds like 128 is kind of in a unique situation that other local districts may not be of the same size, or, you know, the community is kind of setting the tone for what they need, and for whatever reason, we're kind of finding ourselves here just because this is our situation. I'm trying to get a handle on kind of what this may imply in a larger sense, but, yeah, I
We could
think
gather more of that data if that would be helpful to you.
I'm
also.
super comfortable, assuming you guys have, you know, done a lot of that already. But I really am in favor of that kind of farewell semester, to have that transitional time to, you know, give the community a fair heads up, and then likewise make those connections and, you know, other service providers, for lack of better words, right? With other service providers, park districts, whoever it may be.
I am aware of some other high schools that don't this has been a pretty strong program for many
yeah.
years, but with the enrollment declining, many high schools don't have this kind of program. They might have an EL program. I know where I work, we have an agreement with College of Page. They come in and they teach classes in our classrooms in the evening, but it's nothing that we fund. We just provide the resources to be able to do that. So there's a lot of adult education happening in high schools that's not necessarily a standalone program like this that's just designed for like enrichment client kind of
Right,
classes.
and offering our service, I mean, our, not our services, offering our spaces sounds like a really happy medium to still kind of make those things available within the community.
So we would be asking, and I know it's a quick turnaround with the way the schedule is, but at our November board meeting to make a decision so that we can, go ahead and start, making the planning. So that's our recommendation.
I think the
But would
sooner
we
we can
have a
make that.
commitment from the other bodies that they would be taking over some of the, or at least the most popular courses, the ones that are being participated in?
I have some initial,
We've had
commitment.
some verbal commitments
yeah.
already.
Yeah, I think the sooner we can make that call, then that kind of thing can happen and we can start making sure that transition is as smooth as possible. Any other comments, questions? Okay, moving on. Title I review.
So Dan and I have been working on our Title I application. This is something that was new to the district in 2020, 2021. So that was the first year that we applied for the grant, and we received about $85,000. And 99% of that was used for summer school salaries and summer school transportation. The following year, we received about $88,000 and 86% of the funds were used for summer school salaries and transportation. This year, our allocation is $64,736,000, but we have a good chunk of money in rollover funds. So the total available for reimbursement is $83,753. Title I is generated by students who receive free and reduced lunch. That doesn't mean that you have to spend the money on the students who receive free and reduced lunch. You spend the money on the students who are at risk or identified as needing more substantial help in terms of academics, or just there's several categories that go into at risk. So when you complete the application, we have to rank the schools. And the schools are ranked by poverty levels. Vernon Hills has had, currently they're about, last year was about 12.7% of the students were identified as economically disadvantaged. Right now we have 222 students in that category. And LHS had 4.9% of the students. So the way the application is ranked is that schools who have a greater than or equal to low-income student population of the district average are the ones that qualify to receive the targeted assistance. So our district average is about 8%. So when we rank the schools, because LHS has been trending for the past 5 years around 4.3 to 4.7% of low-income students, they don't qualify for the use or the allocation of the funds. So it's all used at Vernon Hills. At least that's where the targeted assistance is.
Can you repeat the district average?
It's about 8.5%.
8.5, thank you.
So when we were looking at making the best use of the funds is identifying areas, and we worked with Dr. Gilliam and he worked with some of his leadership, and Dan and I met with him and we hashed out several ideas. And one of the things that kept coming is ensuring that our families and our students know about the resources we have available to them in the schools, but then also identifying a more systemic way to provide additional parent education, for instance, or just support for how they can better, support their students at home. As we have 4 districts around us that have a very strong parent outreach program, 73. 75, 76, and 120. And so they've developed a more of a systemic approach where they have almost like a professional development calendar that is provided to families at the beginning of the school year, and there's different sessions that folks can come out to. But then they also do a lot of support. If we had a family who was evicted for some reason, this person would have a list of resources and knowing where to go to help them find a home quickly, if they need to get furniture, where they need to, all of those things, so that as a community as a whole, we're responding holistically to all of the needs. And then this was also something that could help us with our EL program. Now that last year we reached the threshold of having 20 full-time bilingual students. We have more than that at Vernon Hills, but once you hit the threshold of 20, you have to provide what's called a bilingual parent advisory council. And so these are families that come together and they help the district in making decisions on how to spend the funds that are allocated towards EL programming, and what kind of parent education programs they would like to see, whether they would like to see ESL classes being offered at the schools, or some of the schools call them parent universities. Other schools have something where it's called Navigating the American Education System, and it's like it's like education for parents, and they come in and they have sessions and they just learn how to be better supports for their students.
So did I hear Vernon Hills hit the threshold? Has Libertyville hit the threshold? Okay.
No. They have about 15 total EL.
It is 20 in one language.
In one language,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Mhm. And LHS is about 15 in multiple languages. So this person would also help support that program, as well as in the summer preparing, whether it was if our students need help with school supplies, more of, food pantry type things, just those types of services. We were, for instance, homecoming came up, and a lot of their kids that are on free and reduced lunch status didn't know that they don't have to pay for a ticket. And so just some basic stuff like that, where it just would be easier to have a direct point person that can support parents.
Are the LSTs providing that support now?
So they try. I think that, they try. I don't know that it's reaching the success that we would like it to reach. I mean, they have a lot of other things on their plate. And so I think they try to make calls and reach out to families, but something more systemic, I think would be better support.
And I think the idea of what we had been spending that money on, again, it's a grant and it's targeted just for us to provide services for our families who have low income. Our expense before spending it on summer school was not targeted to those students. So we have to find a different way to spend that money than what we've been spending it in the last 2 years. They won't allow us to do that anymore. They're saying the way we spend the money needs to be targeted on Vernon Hills and needs to be targeted on research-based things that will show support for the family and or support for the students.
Is this something we apply for every year?
Yes, so this is an application that is available every year. It's a 3-part application. We also get our Title II funding and through this application, as well as our Title IV funding, but that's not tied to free and reduced lunch status.
I was
We
just trying to get at the
anticipate-
longevity of the funding source, that
That's exactly what I'm.
it'll still be something that we can use to pay for this service.
Yeah, our low income numbers have not trended down. I looked it up from 2018 till now. And the district average in 28 was 7.8. Right now we're at 8.5. At LHS in 2018, I think that's the one where it's more stable. It's ranged between 4.3 to 4.9 in the past 5 years. And Vernon Hills, we have seen it's ranged from 10.5 up to 12.7. So we're seeing a little bit of an uptick. I don't know when the funds became available to the district or how that happened. I do know that we started applying for the application 2 years ago.
I appreciate the metrics. we
Title
can-
I's been around a long
A
time,
long time.
and many districts rely, it provides a lot of resources to a lot of great.
Are there
low-income
are some
districts.
Title I schools?
Yeah, once
Vernon
you reach a
Hills
certain
would be
threshold.
our Title
Title
I
I
school.
So
Well-
did ISB say that Title I cannot be applied to an interventionist trying to close the gap in performance? Is that, because I thought I read that we were using it for an interventionist in Vernon Hills and that was not approved by ISB?
So that was the plan that was submitted April or May. And so it was not approved. I think there were a few reasons that it was not approved. Not that they said the interventionist wasn't what we should be spending it on. The interventionist position simply didn't get filled. Like it wasn't identified as a need that the school then went on and filled.
Yeah, can I give some more context?
Yes.
So Title I, historically for District 128 until 2021, we have just chosen not to participate. We knew that the resulting money that we would get would not be a lot. And so then there is usually this systemic decision of, is it worth the money? And for decades, District 128's decision was no. And I think it was reviewed periodically, and we got a call in 2021. I remember Rita walking in my office, Dr. Fisher, and they said, well, ISB literally called us and said, hi, if you want to get ESSER 3 money, $500,000, you have to file for Title I, otherwise you won't get anything. And so at that point, we said, okay, I guess we're going to apply for Title I now. And so that's when we started getting the 85,000. So at that point, and especially at that time of the year, the idea was that summer school, but I don't think anybody felt that there's probably a better way to do this. But with everything else going on, we really didn't have a chance to really sit down and figure out what do we think is the best use of this money. And Dr. Fisher wrote in the SEL interventionist based on kind of how we had used some of our ESSER funds and kind of thought that could be a way, but knew that further discussions were going to be had. And so even that SEL I originally put in was honestly intended to be a placeholder until we really fleshed out the idea. And just to be honest, it's just taken this long to really flesh out what we think is the best use of this money. And that is the place that we're at right now. In terms of the funding, so Title I has been available forever. And the funding has remained largely intact, but also there are certain hold harmless levels that says no matter what, you're going to get a certain amount of money. And I do believe that we are at a hold harmless level, meaning that we wouldn't get likely less than 60,000. I think no matter what is the idea. If you have more that show up, you can get a whole lot more. Like how much was in your other district?
1.9 million.
1.9 million for Title I. So there's a huge range that can come from Title I. And so the idea is so with a lot of our grants, especially our major grants, like we have a consistent plan, like idea, we know like philosophically, systemically, how we're using this grant every year. It's just tweaking it a bit. We've never really had that with Title I because it's been so new and we got it kind of during the pandemic and there was a lot going on. I believe now is the time that with district leadership, building leadership, that it's where it's targeted to. This is the recommendation for how best to use these funds in a systemic way going forward. That's essentially what we're talking about. In terms of like targeted or whatever schools, like so we're not anywhere near a threshold that a whole school would become free. Like my kids happen to go to a school where we live and the whole school is free. That's because the level hits so high that it just, at that point, they just turn the whole school, free.
Yeah, it has to be 40%.
There you go. So yeah, that's just a little more context in terms of where we're at.
So we have $83,753 available. Have we already received approval for this position?
So once we get the go-ahead, I will resubmit with the changes.
And how long will it take to know if ISB approves that particular use of the funds?
I don't think it'll take long because we don't have a very long or tedious application. There's 3 budget boxes, so I don't think it would take our principal consultant long to return it.
Is there a possible scenario where the board approves it? You fill the position, but then we don't get approved for funding?
No, I do think that we would get feedback from ISB on whether it's approved or not, I think before winter break. I think it would happen quickly, actually.
Okay. So there's not a scenario where we would make a commitment to hire someone and then not receive these
Yeah,
funds?
and
Okay,
typically when it's not approved, they work with you to make the changes that you need to get what it is that you're proposing approved.
okay.
Unless you're
understood.
using it for something that they clearly have stated in their instructions, you can't use this money for. But this certainly falls within those things, but also, like, I just want to be clear, it is possible that happens, but we would, like, I think, like, employment wise, like, we wouldn't actually hire this person until we knew this funding was secured.
Thank you.
And the funding is, like, this position is tied to the funding.
Yes, it seems clearly very targeted as you described the criteria.
And the reason why we felt it was important to bring this to you is it's a new position. And so because you approve new positions and because we're really doing a lot of advocacy work to identify student needs and saying, how are we meeting these needs? We wanted to make sure you understood that structure of the proposal, how it was going to be funded, and that grant dollars are being used specifically for this.
And is there a potential for some synergy with the feeder districts that already have these programs in place so that this person could get up to speed and not have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, but really take the best practices from neighboring from schools in our community that are already doing this and have some collaboration?
I think they would welcome the cross-district collaboration. That is the approach that the 76, 75, and 120, they do a lot of their things together. And I think 73 would welcome a lot of collaboration and helping, being a better resource to the entire community.
That's great. I'm not surprised to hear that, but always a good thing.
And then I was looking at the job description. And under personal and professional requirements, this would be non-certified staff, correct? Okay. So I see where it said, background working in collaboration with community groups, nonprofit organizations, local government agencies, et cetera, et cetera. So is there, typically you would put this on some type of a certified position, you would put onto some type of consortium or onto our district website, and certified teachers would see this as an opportunity. But how do you find these people? Seems like it would be challenging.
Yeah, so they've, the assistant soup over at Mundelein High School has offered to share with their folks. She feels that there's some good people in the pipeline that currently work in similar roles out at Mundelein High that might be interested. But I do think it's just a matter of sharing with our networks and the folks that are currently in the role and helping in hopes that they will help us spread the word as well.
We also post, teacher positions, non-certified teacher positions on Indeed and some other places. So somebody could be looking for a job and come across this. So, some of our staff that have been hired will go to Indeed or some other spots. So we'll send the word out though.
And then furthermore, could someone who is certified potentially have a position like this?
Yes, people who are certified can fill, it would be at the salary range that
Right.
we would be doing it, but absolutely, there could be someone who says this is the role for me, and they
Okay.
could definitely apply.
So my history in Title I is all about intervention and about performance. And that, we're getting this money because we have these free and reduced students, and we also have that gap in performance. So how are we going to align I have kind of two questions. Do other districts have a designated position that we are proposing? Or is it more kind of these job descriptions, which are all really important, kind of disseminated amongst different people within the district?
So there are designated positions, each of the districts listed, 73, 75, 76, 120. North Chicago, where I came from, has one. Many districts have a designated position for this.
So how are we going to measure this position with performance, with increased performance, or at least closing that gap?
Yeah, so there is a required set aside in the Title I application for specific things. So we have to have a set aside for supporting our homeless and neglected and delinquent students. And there is a required set aside for family outreach and development, just because they understand the research, right? If we support our families who are identified as, economically disadvantaged and help them understand what are the supports that they can do at home to improve outcomes for their kids at school. There is research that directly ties to that. We did explore academic interventions in the district, and well, to be truthfully honest with you, that is not something that is very tight at the moment, something that we will have to develop what those interventions look like, what those metrics are. And it's going to take a little bit of time for us to be able to say, okay, here are the targeted academic interventions that we have for our students. And here are the metrics that we are looking at on a regular basis to say that they are working. Right now, we're not doing that.
Other questions?
So this is gonna post on the 14th, and then the application deadline's on the 30th. So we're giving people 16 days to process that. Is that enough time?
Is that?
Yeah, I thought we made it in December, but we can change that.
Thank you for pointing that out.
And I'm sorry, the job must be hired for by a certain date in order to secure the Title I funds that, do you hear what I'm saying? Like, if heaven forbid, we couldn't hire in the time frame that we were hoping to hire. Let's say instead, this came along to us in the spring or worse off next school year. Would the funds still be available?
Some of the funds.
Yeah, so then we'll have
carried
to
over.
find something else to use the current allocation for.
Okay, thanks.
Some funds can carry over, but not all.
I think it sounds like a great opportunity. Like this is very much in line with our equity plan, and I'm interested to see how it works.
I am too, and I think there are a lot of very interesting metrics that can be tied to the success of this position. And I look forward to seeing how that affects our goals.
Yeah, so because it is funded through Title I, we have to keep attendance. There's some paperwork and metrics that we'll have to submit annually to the state.
Well, I agree with you, Don. I think this is exciting.
Yeah, it's resources that, it's found resources that we can now use to target individuals, families, whatever that we haven't targeted before, so.
And I can
That's
see
a
how
good
it
thing.
would have a direct impact on student success. So exciting.
I'm going to admit some ignorance here. I understand bilingual and biliterate, but could you define bicultural for me?
Someone who, for instance, I would consider myself bicultural because I feel like I have a deep knowledge of the Latino culture. So someone who is able to connect to our families in that sense as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that's probably almost as important as the biliterate. You can speak another language, but can you communicate in a way that, really understands where they're coming from?
Right.
Okay, anything else on Title I? Next up, superintendent goals.
Yes, so I know that we have discussed these at 3 other meetings beforehand, but I did add a few more metrics that have come to my mind. So you'll see that I've added some more things in that far right column, and I will continue to do so in terms of as more ways that I can show you progress toward those goals. I'll continue to populate that. But again, these are the things that we talked about at our retreat in September, that I shared with you in October. We're just getting them on the agenda to be formally approved by you tonight. But I've been working diligently on these already.
keep forgetting to turn my microphone. You should never give me a microphone with a button. Uh,
I'll take it.
Any other comments, questions? No, good. Okay, IASB Resolutions Committee report. So everyone has a copy of this. And this is coming up rather quickly. Just a couple weeks, I'll be representing our board at that meeting. We could, I mean, there's not that many. We can just sort of scan down through them, and whoever has comments one way or the other, we want
I
to.
thought that was helpful last year. We just went
just
through one
run
by
right
one,
through,
and some
check out
were
those.
very easy and some were a little bit more conversation, but I
Yeah.
thought that was a good use of our time.
And really the process in a nutshell is any of the ones that the committee, the state committee has suggested do adopt, will go on a consent agenda. At the meeting, people can pull things off that consent agenda to, discuss, for people to discuss. Likewise, things that they do not recommend adopting do not go on that consent agenda and require whoever submitted it to request that it be considered by the entire delegate assembly. And so there's a process that would have already gone through. So then those are raised. They have some opportunity to defend those. So anything that's indicated as not recommended may come up, but likely won't. In some cases, we know that. But the ones that are indicated as do recommended doesn't necessarily mean they're going to pass. They might have some pretty interesting heated discussion as a matter of fact. So we'll just go through the new resolutions. There's 3 new resolutions and there's another 2, 4, 5 adjustments to existing resolutions. So the first one, fund balances and the Miller ratio adjustment. Any thoughts or comments on this? It's just increasing that ratio to give districts a little more headroom for their fund balances.
I think it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think independent now, what we've just done here to adjust our year-end fund balances to really reflect excluding the early taxes would have an effect and would, this would have less of a concern for us, but those that don't do that, this would be a much bigger concern. So I have no problem with that one either. Anyone have any alternate thoughts on that? It's pretty good.
I support it.
Alternate fuel bus funding. They're saying they do not recommend, and they have some reasons for doing this.
There are a list I noticed in the Verigy presentation that we'll be going over in F&F. About 12 sources of federal funding for this and about at least 4, maybe half a dozen sources of state funding for this. So while I agree with the Libertyville District 203 that it would be great to get funding for this, I think the Resolutions Committee is spot on that there are other sources of funding and other things to advocate for on behalf of this.
So anyone else have a concern one way or the other? I mean, I agree that we should be supporting, clean energy for our buses, but that maybe this particular thing isn't at this point in time the best process, given all the other opportunities for funding. Anyone have any dramatic differences with that? Okay. Moving on, local, state, federal relations, firearm dealer location. This is actually submitted by our neighbors over at 120. Basically talking about signage and location, trying to move weapons dealers farther away from schools. They're recommending do not adopt. With some reasons here. I mean, again, the premise of getting weapons away from our school children is a good one. I'm not too sure that this is the best way to do it, or if there's other ways to do it, but that was their recommendation not to adopt. Anyone have a strong feeling that, I mean, it's possible this will come up. They'll plead their case. We may even wind up voting on.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest, any measure that makes it more difficult to sell guns in a community, I'm gonna support.
I'm not sure this would make it more difficult. It would increase the radius
Right.
by
But-
1,000 feet, but it wouldn't make it more difficult for someone in that community to
But it-
purchase a weapon.
I kind of think it might. If it's
They're not saying that they can't be there. They're just saying it has to be
away from
somewhere
school.
else in the community.
Right, but if there's other schools and other places throughout the community or daycare centers or enrichment centers all throughout a community spread throughout. And it gets harder and harder to place an arms dealer within those places because you have those,
Overlapping rings of
right?
proximity.
To me, it may naturally allow for that or not allow for that, I guess is what I'm saying, right?
But is this the best way to do?
I
that?
don't know, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying it's like any measure,
It's a way.
it's a
Yeah,
way.
Yeah. And I think their premise is just to avoid, not necessarily to impact your ability to sell weapons, it's the ability for the kids to see those venues.
Correct.
And
Closer
that's-
I
to
read
their
it to the
school.
as a proximity to
Yeah.
the school,
Right.
and it seems to be, I mean, it's not an I obviously agree in premise, but it's this arbitrary 500 versus 1,500, which neither is too close, but
My kids
which
went to
both are
Adler.
too close, I should say. It just, I could see where it would be hard.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, I mean, I understood the reasoning in the resolution on not to recommend it and probably not the best way, if that's the way the community
I don't
wants to
know.
go.
I don't know if it's efficient, right? Where's the efficacy truly, but, I don't know. Don, what were you? gonna say?
I was gonna say, my kids went to Adler School. There are two places where you can purchase guns within 1,500 feet of Adler School. I don't think my kids were affected one way or the other by the signage. In one case, it's somebody selling them out of his home, so there is no signs. You know, they would have to be searching online to actually find a gun store on Walnut Street, but so I don't think that our community has the like guns, buy them here signage that our kids are necessarily going to be
Right.
affected by. But I don't think that where guns are being sold is the issue. Any legislation right now that does something to keep guns from getting into our school by making it more difficult for somebody to put a gun store anywhere decreases the opportunity for a gun to be purchased and brought into a school.
Right.
So I kind of feel like anytime that you could support something that's going to make it harder to have a gun shop is better than not trying to do that. Now, Lisa raises the point, is this the best way to do that? And I don't know the best way to do it. It's a way, again, to do it.
So there are right now 9 guns for every citizen of this country. So I think we're suffering an epidemic of gun violence in this country. We need to strengthen and enforce existing laws. We need to get automatic weapons out of the hands of citizens. And those are the type of things that are going to have the biggest impact on keeping our kids safe in schools. I'm just not sure that.
I don't
this is the-
disagree with you.
I'm just not sure. I'm agreeing with you that I'm not sure this is the best way to make students in schools safer. There's a much bigger problem.
I agree completely. I think this resolution may have more of an effect on the social emotional wellness suggestions, right, that's right, that's what it's for. And so, Don, I appreciate what you're saying about your own kids' experience at Adler School. And, I mean, to be frank with you, it was a different time, wasn't it? And now we're here. And so if we are in fact trying to support the wellness of our kids' social and emotional health, I think even signage sometimes can creep into effect, right? And this is born out of, I don't know how aware you guys are of the local issue that this was born out of, but there was a proposed range and dealer that was supposed to come in over on Route 45, where 45 and 83 meet. There's a large space there. You may have seen it. It's been empty for ages and ages and ages, this large retail space. And this was a huge deal in Mundelein with the village and the would-be owners petitioning the village to allow this to happen. And so I think this resolution was definitely born out of that, because I think you had a lot of people from the community saying, this is very close to the schools. I think Diamond Lake School was the one in particular it was close to. There was also Key Martial Arts, which is right behind this proposed site. And so you have a lot of after-school programs happening there and childcare. And so I think they kind of zeroed in on this as an example.
So if the signage is the issue, this resolution doesn't talk about signage. It talks about the actual facility. So if you wanted to address signage, that would be a differently worded resolution. So I'm in favor of the resolutions committee's recommendation.
Yeah, there's a very good chance this won't even come up for a vote, but I think it's valuable to have on the list. Just to keep
Continued
these
conversations.
things
Right,
yeah, the
maybe they can go back
conversation's
to the
going.
drawing board and
I
come
think
up with
there's,
something that people.
Yeah.
could
there may
look
have
at,
been,
right?
there may be an opportunity for them to come back and
'Cause-
reword this a little bit and
And if that's the case, I mean,
Mhm.
I think we're all pretty aligned on anything we can do to keep our kids safer and keep them out of school. We're gonna support.
Absolutely.
Yep.
That's not what this is about. I think
Right.
it's about the way
What-
that this particular.
What does it really address?
Correct.
Yeah.
yeah, and it may have, like you said, been a reaction to some.
Yeah, and that's a
Resolution.
totally fair point. So,
But I appreciate your context, because
Mhm,
I
yeah,
wasn't
I wasn't
aware
aware of that either.
of that particular location being in question.
and it ultimately was shut down. I mean, they aren't going through with it.
Yeah, I think I did see something. I didn't realize that was the location, but I saw the person who was proposing opening that business withdrew the request.
Yes,
And I'm sure the community had something
yes.
to do with that withdrawal.
Okay, moving on to the amended of existing positions. So these are. You can pretty much, scan down the things that are underlined or the new or changed text and if it's crossed out. So these are existing resolutions. So the first one having to do with capital grant funding for school buildings. So they're talking about, in the one case, the model for how the funding should be based, that type of thing. Resolutions committee says recommends to adopt. Anyone have any concerns with this one? Looks pretty straightforward, just some cleaning up and adjusting of the language.
I don't think it'll do much for our district, but the idea that they have those 4 criteria for funding considerations, I think is terrific.
School safety fund, state level financing public education, position statement. I'm looking here, they added a bunch of things that defined some of the things that the funds would go to support. Also talked about the tiers system of the evidence-based funding. So again, it's just sort of some language clarification cleanup. Anyone have any concerns with that? It's pretty straightforward. Legislative activity. This one, they're saying do not adopt. I'm not too sure you know, I didn't fully comprehend the reason why they suggested these changes. Maybe I'm not thinking through it well, but basically they were just changing the title and the middle of that first paragraph. I mean, the statement stays if it's the changes aren't adopted, so.
Are you on number 8 yet?
Some number 6, legislative
Number 6.
activity.
Number 6, I'm sorry. I really want to talk about number 8. I
Yeah.
am a
Okay,
huge
okay, we'll get there, we'll get there.
of number 8. Can't wait to talk
So,
about that.
so, anyone have any concerns about number 6, just leaving it as?
Their recommendation is do not adopt. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
which means
I
leave it
agree.
as it is. And if you look in the back, you can see all these in
Right.
their original wording, so. Number 7, almost to 8. Mandates Review Committee. Again, this was a fairly minor change and they recommend do adopt.
Agreed.
And I
and-
notice our colleagues in Lake Forest are very active with the resolutions.
Yes.
We had heard at the Lakes Division dinner, them talking about advocacy and how important it was to their district, and that's reflected in this booklet. They're very active.
Yeah, so the gentleman that was on that panel is on the safety committee, the Ed Red Safety Committee. I'm on that as well. So we've been working this, I'm not surprised at some of the safety related stuff that comes out of that too. So. So they're looking at periodic review of state and federal mandates. That's fine. It just a slight adjustment there. Now, number 8, district organizations and elections, financial contributions to school board elections. They recommend that we do adopt this. And the wording there in that first paragraph strongly believes school board candidates should solicit, accept, or receive either a donation or financial contribution from special interest groups, PACs, or political parties. And I too agree with that completely.
School boards, library boards, village boards
Should be
are some of the
nonpartisan.
last bastions of nonpartisanship. And that is exactly how it should be. I'm incredibly proud of our board that we have never let politics enter the conversation or influence us. And I think this strengthening this resolution regarding school board candidates not accepting contributions from partisan groups is an excellent way to safeguard that here and all over the state.
I agree.
Agreed.
Everyone good with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Go for it. And then
I feel
the
like we
rest
need
of
to spend
these
more
are.
time on it just for Lisa.
In the interest of moving along,
It's okay.
in the interest of moving along, I'll zip it.
So the rest of these are do not present, so they're just here for information. There's a couple of, if you look down them, there's some that said, you know, okay, next cycle, you can bring this one back. There's a cycle process that if you bring a resolution multiple times, then you have to stay out for a while, kind of deal. And then the rest of these are current positions and amendments, so thank you for your feedback. I will take that with me to as I vote.
Thank you for representing us.
Yes,
Yep,
we
yep,
appreciate it.
That'll be a good time.
You've always been willing to give extra of your time as
Yeah.
a school board member to represent us in multiple venues, and this is one that I especially appreciate.
Thank you. It's actually an interesting kind of process, a very formal process. Anyone want, along the back, there are seats. You can actually come in and observe. You can't participate, but you can observe. And it's kind of a interesting thing to see. So. Okay, future agenda, agenda items.
I don't have one, but I have a quick question. Under 4 discussion, how many of those things will be on action items individually versus going on the consent agenda?
If you look at it, employment employees, educational tours will go under the consent agenda. You're not voting on the report card highlights, and then the community education program and the Title I review will go separate items. Again, consent agenda are things that regularly, regular board business. So those are not regular board business.
Okay, good. Any other, any future agenda items? Anyone wants to toss on the agenda for next time? Okay.
I know one of the things, real quick,
ahead.
I think you had an email about January Ed Red
Mhm.
Yes.
dinner and looking at the board meeting, so I wanted to bring that to attention on the January board meeting.
Which thing?
The January board meeting, it's the same
Carol
night as the Ed
sent
Red dinner.
we
Carol sent
moved
some
it
out.
from the other date, anticipating when they normally had it, and then they moved it to the date we
Oh.
moved our meeting, so that's what Carol gets for being so organized and ahead of the game. But we did anticipate that and sent that conflict to all of you, so the sooner we can potentially reschedule that and let the public know for your calendars and for all of ours.
Did everybody reply to Carol
Not yet.
about any individual date?
So,
Because she threw 2 dates out there, right?
yeah,
Like Wednesday and
the following Monday or the Wednesday. I thought we always moved it just a day to the Tuesday. Is there a conflict with that?
I think she thought that that might be the Ed Red night and then a board meeting night. So to have 2 long evenings in a row is why she went to Wednesday. And then the other option is just to go if Mondays work best, to go to the next Friday, since there are 5 Fridays in.
Monday.
Mondays, yes, thank you, Mondays in the month,
Well,
Fridays.
I'm okay to do Tuesday. I mean, actually,
Yeah.
it all has to do with my travel plans, so
Of
if I
course.
can group things together, that's great.
Yeah, because I know we've done that in the past.
Would
So
people
everybody-
prefer that Tuesday, knowing that for those of you who are going to attend Ed Red, it would be 2 nights in a row?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it-
I'm
it'd
fine
be
with
3
it.
for me. 'cause
Only
I
if
can
somebody
make
brings a
Wednesday.
birthday cake. Is that
Fine.
Well, definitely.
I'm always up for cake.
What's your favorite flavor, birthday girl?
I'm fine with Tuesday. I've never been.
Okay, then how about if we go ahead and tentatively plan on that
Tuesday.
Tuesday?
Yeah, because I can't do the Wednesday, so that'll be 3 nights in a row. for me.
So you're a lucky
That's-
man.
You're a busy boy, Jim.
So confirming the 23rd will be the dinner, 24th will be the meeting.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Sounds good. Anything else? Okay, we will adjourn at 7:06. Thank
Okay.
you.
We need a bio break, or shall we continue on?
I'm gonna get up and get more water, but that's all I need.
Okay,
We're ready to
we'll,
roll.
we'll
Let's
let you do
roll.
that.
We
Think
are going to
anybody want
be,
it?
I think, starting with a nice track
I'm gonna
around the
start
building.
with my second.
So let's go ahead and call to order the Facilities and Finance Committee meeting for Monday, November 7th. It is 7:07 PM. Real quick, I'm gonna review the agenda. We'll make sure there's no public comment. Anyone that wants to comment, we're gonna take a tour of our LHS FACS labs, our Families and Consumer Science labs that have received a facelift. Discuss our 2022 tax levy, very update, ESSER 3 funds update, and the fiscal year 2023 state maintenance project grant will be also up for discussion. And then future agenda items. So Mary, is there any email public comment?
There is
Is anyone in the audience that would like to address the board? Okay. All righty, so let's take a field trip.
Program and Personnel Committee meeting adjourned. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next. Currently on break. Facilities and Finance Committee meeting up next.
Ready to go? Okay. All right, thank you for that tour of our new fax labs. And I misspoke earlier. I used the word update. That was a lot more than a facelift. That was infrastructure improvements and really an incredible learning space that we've put together there. So I thank you for the work on that and thank you for the tour. Moving on to the 2022 tax levy. We've obviously discussed this for several meetings now, and I want to thank Dan for putting together the very usable, readable, and understandable FAQ on the tax levy. There's no new information, correct?
No, but also credit to Mary and Denise who helped look at it. And so even the one you have there,
Thank
it's
you,
been
thank you.
tweaked a bit, but it's largely the same
Yeah.
in terms of the content. Yeah, so there is no new information. Everything is still exactly the same. We did publish the notice in the paper for the hearing. We published it last Wednesday, which is between the 7 and 14-day window you have. It's kind of funny. I took the piece of paper with me because I was looking for the paper. We didn't happen to get our Herald that day, so I went to the gas station to find one, and I found the last one. I go flipping open the page, and I found 5 levy notices in there. One for us, one for Hawthorne 73, one for a couple other school districts. So it was just, this is the time. So if you, pretty much every single day, you're going to see these in the papers due to the CPI. So you're going to see that a lot. So ours was published precisely. And yeah, we've got the FAQ and essentials ready to go for sharing with our public for our hearing a week from today.
Yep, very important hearing, and then board adoption of the tax levy happens next week. And we welcome members of the public who would like to attend and have any questions.
Yep, I think there is one question that I think we have, and I think really the question is if you would like a special communication on social media about these documents that are posted on our website. Is that fair? Is that fair?
Yes, if you wanted the FAQ shared on social media, or if you just wanted it shared in EPOB prints and the board meeting information that goes out.
I personally think that the more places you can disseminate information that is understandable like that, and encourage the public to learn about it, ask questions about it, and participate in the process, I think that's valuable. Anyone else?
I agree.
Totally agree. I think it allows us to drive the narrative.
Yep.
And this is a particularly good narrative. You did an excellent job on the FAQ. So I think being proactive on
Okay.
the communication.
I totally agree.
Does anybody,
No,
I'm open if anybody disagrees, but
no. The more
if there is a
transparency, the
void,
better.
the narrative will be filled in by someone else.
Yeah, right. Okay, there's your resounding yes, Mary. Please proceed. Thank you, Dan, for bringing that up. Anything else on the tax levy until next week? Okay, moving on, Vergy update.
Yeah, Vergy. So,
Vergy.
so to bring you back, whenever we talked about this last, we had a meeting with Vergy who shared their information. We shared that presentation as well. At that time, Vergy was watching our committee meeting and followed up and said, "Hi, we'd love to meet with you to clarify some of the questions you had and fill in some of the gaps." And so Mark and I met with them, and we went through. We talked about the kind of the scope, and so really, I think overall their idea was, here are all the things that we think you could do, but we know it depends on where you're at as a district in terms of what are the things that you're interested in doing. These are all the things, these are our ideas. Essentially, these are Vergy's ideas for things that you could do. Because a lot of them already dovetail with things that are already on our list in terms of repairing roofs and things like that. Like we've got a lot of those things scheduled. And then they came up with other ideas that I thought were helpful. And additionally, in that meeting, actually in our meeting, one of the things that we talked about that was missing from the conversation was what grants are available for us to use that might help offset this, because really everything that we were given was, here's projects that you could do that could save you X amount of money over time, depending on the project. So Verigy met, we had a really good meeting, and essentially the answer to that was, we still don't know. At that point in time in that meeting, when we had, they said the reason we didn't put it there because we don't really know. We thought when Verigy had thought when we had started this process, however long ago, that by now we would have had guidance from particularly the federal government in terms of how this grant money could be available, but we just don't. And so what I think Verigy is trying to encourage everybody in the VTech is to be ready so that when we do find out this information, either we're ready to go with a project or we are able to tweak and basically adapt quickly to get a project in. So that was the follow-up from the conversation we had after we had brought this back in a committee. Feels like a while ago. On Monday, when we had our October board meeting, the VTech had another meeting with Verigy, bringing back all of the information from all of the different entities that they did this initial study on. And so essentially what they did is they took very, very similarly, I attached information for you. At least I think I did. I did. I attached information for you. So they essentially gave us a very similar presentation to what we got, but it was much bigger numbers because it's everybody's stuff. So they put in all those other ideas and thoughts like that they could do. Still missing is the grant part that we don't totally know yet. And so what we have at this point is an initial sense from Verigy after looking at all of the entities. Here's all of the things that we think all of these entities could do that could generate savings, not just dollar savings, but also energy usage, decrease CO2 emissions, all those metrics that they were able to provide. And so really what Verigy is looking for is, what do the entities want to do? What do you really want to do? And what are the next steps? So really the next steps that they're proposing is for the entities to consider a letter of intent. And that is essentially for us to say, we want to commit to the next step. So the previous process we were going through, this initial review, was at no cost to the district. This next set of review, which would be a bit more robust, in depth, would not be without district cost. And part of that letter review would essentially state, if we decide to not go forward with the project, the district would reimburse Verigy for their costs up to a certain amount. And so that's really the state that they're at. And so they're interested in knowing from other entities where they are at and if they're interested.
Some entities have already thrown their hat in the ring to indicate that they're ready to go with that letter of intent. That 50,000 or whatever that cost would be, we actually do get something out of that. It's not like we just sign it. If we decide to back out, we don't get anything. They will actually do a comprehensive report that tells us exactly what kinds of things we need. So if we decide not to go with them, we would still have information that would allow us to piecemeal do our own work rather than working with Verigy if for some reason we decided not to.
Yeah, that's fair. I know they sent that info. I hadn't really read it very closely yet. In terms of a draft of a letter of intent they sent this afternoon. So in terms of, so that's where we are. Then the question is now what? And that's the part that I don't exactly know, and I don't necessarily have a recommendation other than looking at the information they have. A number of the projects they were recommending have already been on a list. Some of them have not been on our list, but are worthy to consider. Personally, it's hard for me to recommend any of their project absent the larger capital project prioritization that we've been talking through. And so what I would like to do is kind of dovetail those together and see where those are, because at the end of the day, the way it's structured right now, essentially the districts would be paying for the bulk of those projects in general. Some projects have some incentives attached to them, like solar has some incentives attached to them. But a lot of them are basically district costs, and that you will save over time, over a period of years. So that's where we are and with Verigy. So I'd love to hear if there are thoughts that you have. Where would you like to go?
I mean, as we work towards putting structure around how we make our capital projects decisions, I don't know if we're ready to do a letter of intent quite yet until we put more meat behind that.
My sense is the same. It would be a little bit like the tail wagging the
Mhm.
dog. I think when I take a step back and I try to put this in perspective, the advantage of the commission was to try to realize economies of scale by having Verigy be able to identify common projects and apply for grants. I'm not hearing that. I'm hearing now that as entities, we have the advantage of being able to choose which projects we want to do, as it should be. But to sign a letter of intent now with Verigy seems like putting the cart before the horse, because we're still in that process of identifying our capital project priorities.
That's true, and I forgot the economies of scale part. So that was also something that wasn't yet part of the analysis. So they put together all of the projects, and really what they were asking for is, okay, now what projects are districts really interested in?
Mhm.
And once they know that, then they want to generate an economies of scale.
Mhm.
Uh,
Well,
After that,
soon on our agenda, we're going to be talking about the Vernon Hills Roof Project for summer 2023. Is it possible that we say one project that we've identified, we agree we want to move forward with, is a roofing project? Clearly, you've identified a grant that will offset some of the costs, certainly not all of the costs. If we identify that one project and say, if there's an additional grant or economy of scale for us to realize, then does it become worth it to consider a letter of intent with Verigy? But I wouldn't want to sign a letter of intent unless we knew that everybody had also identified
Right.
either a roof or a project that would qualify for a similar grant that we would all, that we would all be taking part in.
Did I miss something, or is there like a timeline that they're expecting people to buy in? They're looking for these letters of intent by this year, next year, whatever.
So the first slide says timeline and next step for members, but I didn't see any information on when, because I was looking for the same information in the Verigy presentation.
I believe what they're looking for is districts interested. So the next step would be, I believe it's industrial audit. I believe that was the term, industrial grade audit.
Investment grade audit.
Investment grade, thank you, to do that process. So I think they're interested in knowing from the districts I believe within the next month and a half. I think it was by the end of the calendar year. That part I don't know exactly off the top of my head.
And then
I never
soon
got
after-
that information.
And then
like
soon
a
after that would be
specific
the
date.
board
Mhm.
contract approval. I do see that on page 14 of their slide.
Yeah, I can't see a particular date. The letter of interest essentially is asking us to move into an investment grade audit with the intent of doing projects with Verigy and the VTech.
Turk.
Sorry, I left an R out there. Through 2023.
There may be a point at which we are ready to identify a consultant to help us with not only the grants, but they have listed all the capabilities that working with them gives us. I'm just not sure that we're ready to do that now or in the next month and a half.
Agree. Agree. It seems like a short runway. I mean, we've got, 2 board meetings between now and then. And still have a lot of details to flush out in our, how we make decisions around capital planning. So I think timing wise, I wouldn't be ready to necessarily commit to that quite yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think the district leadership team is doing excellent work on the big picture of capital planning and how we prioritize that. And I don't want to rush that process. I'm very committed to supporting that continued work. I don't want to miss out on an opportunity, but I don't think waiting right now will disqualify us from working with Verigy in the future. If either number one, a potential for an economy of scale to save money on something that we're going to eventually do anyway comes up. Or if after going through the capital planning process and priorities, we identify that having a consultant would actually be a worthwhile investment, we could still seek them out at that point. I'm just not sure we're at that point now. What is everybody?
They're not necessarily consultants so much as performance. So what they do is they lay out a series of steps that we go through, and then they guarantee us some savings as a result of us putting some initial investment in. And if we don't meet that benchmark, then they cover that cost because that's the agreement that they've made. And I can't remember what the number was. Dan, do you remember that their 30-year savings? It was not insignificant.
It was in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Well, that's for the whole consortium, but just
For
for
just
ours,
us?
it was several $1 million over 30 years,
Okay.
which
I
isn't,
I think it was a couple tens of millions. Something like
Yes.
that. I think it was. I don't remember the exact number, but it's like spend 20 and get X number of savings
Right.
over 30 years.
so our question is, we can't come up with $20 million right from the start, but we have a roof that we need to get done. And so we know that we're going to put $1 million out there just to get the roof done. There are 8 other entities that are also doing roof and solar. So if we were to talk to Verigy about getting into like project at a time that meets our timeline, so that we're not necessarily having to commit money that we don't have up front, but we can spread that out over a little bit of time, that would be great. We just have so many unknowns, which you're really good at working with, Dan, because you've told us again and again that you don't have these numbers. And that's what I think that's where we are right now, is that we just don't know. We don't know what the economies of scale are. We don't know what the grants are. And those are not insignificant chunks of money. So I agree that it might be premature to sign a letter of interest that commits us to spending money if we're not going to use any of what they're going to provide for us. But if we are going to use some of what they provide for us, like what's that break point?
And pardon me, I have so much confidence in the track record of our team. I guess I'm curious, what would Verigy provide that Dan and Mark and their team wouldn't be providing us? Because to be insured against a supply chain issue, if we're trying to open up, Vernon Hills High School in the fall of 2023, and there's unanticipated delays, that still doesn't put students in the building.
Right.
So I'm not seeing the forest through the trees, but I don't know what benefit making that commitment to working with Verigy would give us unless we knew, again, sorry to beat a dead horse, but if there was economy of scale or grant money that we had not already identified available
Right.
for that project.
So Dan, is the part of what they're asking, like, they gave us a little checklist. What are the things that we're interested in? And we have, this is slide 6, I think. It shows that we're doing HVAC work. Well, we know that we're going to have to upgrade some HVAC eventually, some lighting work. We know that we're interested in solar, but we don't know when or where or how much. We know that we have to do roofing. So there's several things that are on our list that we know we want to do. It goes back to what Casey was saying. Where does it fit into our capital plan? And I don't have answers to that.
Right.
I just, my personal bent is I want to do everything that we can to reduce our CO2 footprint. I want to be, good neighbors in terms of energy use. I want to be good financial stewards. So the sooner you have solar up, the less time it takes us to pay off or to realize returns from that. So I guess I feel a little push towards getting some of these things done, but the unknowns I still struggle with. So I don't have any answers either, is all I'm saying.
I think the bottom line is we need to do it on our timeline, not somebody else's timeline. Whatever these projects are, we have to be comfortable with our plans and our capital investments.
Well, and I do want to be, I think Verigy is a trusted, reliable provider in these areas. They're respected in what they do. They have a lot of experience with these types of projects. And they have a lot of resources that they can throw at projects like this to do research, get things ready, get things shovel ready, do a lot of those other things. Because, typically when we're talking about projects, it's all the design and everything, we have a lot of great tools for that, but in terms of how do you pay for it, that's not part of typically what we have. Like we just pay cash for it essentially. That's never really been part of the equation. This is something in terms of particularly accessing the grants was, I thought, the biggest value and economies of scale, depending on what you're doing. So like electric car chargers, I think that's a cool thing. I would love to see that go. And especially looking at something township wide, I think that's great to look at. So the other thing is I think the ambition here is extremely admirable to okay, how do you herd, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. How do you herd nearly 20 different entities to try to get them to do something sustainable projects? How do you get them together? And is there something that you can do together? It's hard to just get 2 entities to agree to do something together. Like how much time sometimes we spend on IGAs just to get 2 entities to work together. Trying to get 20 of them to work together is very hard. And so I think the ambition was there. I think the intent is really good. I think the reality everybody is facing is there are that many number of entities with that many different boards, with that many different strategic plans, with that many different visions, and it's really hard to find where are you lined up. But they still said, okay, we did this work, but now we want to see, maybe we do have places to line up. So here's all the things we thought that you could do. What stuff do you really want to do? So I think my gut is, based on this conversation, let's look at what, because really it's through 2023. So we're really mostly talking about summer of 23 is really what we're talking about. Is there something based on our long range plan that is tied into, that would be scheduled, like the timing is right for 2023, that would match one of these categories? And for us to say, this is something that we could move forward with here, whether or not we necessarily need to do an investment grade like that. I don't know if we need to, but and then maybe there's a synergy there. So I should be also some of the cost savings were economies of scale with all those different entities. The other one in economies of scale, just in terms of trades, but also in terms of them. So Verigy basically offering a discount price. If they can work with everybody, they'll charge everybody a little bit less. So that was also part of the savings, because every time you do projects, you have design costs that are associated with that. And that would be Verigy's role in that process. So I think the next step for us to do is to look at our summer 2023, the list that they gave us, see if something does line up, and then have a conversation with them too. Because sometimes those are easier to just have honest conversations with each other about, all right, what's the list? What do we think is likely? And, you know, we can start with a tentative list and that doesn't necessarily obligate us to anything. So it's almost like you kind of have to be like, hey, what about this? You know, could we maybe do this? It's almost like a proposal versus a proposal, right? You got to kind of talk carefully, but really get something out there so that they have something to react to and analyze with all of the entities.
That makes sense.
So.
And perhaps the cost of working with them would be offset by savings in other areas like design.
I'm a little skeptical on working with Vergy on some type of projects. Looking at, for instance, roofing, the way to gain the savings on the roofing was to add more insulation than what code requires. So you put your additional cost in on insulation to see savings in the future. We already, we have consultants in place right now that are doing our work and know our buildings. And now we're bringing somebody in that doesn't know our buildings and we're starting from scratch. Is going to be expensive. A lot of man hours for them just to learn for what the project is. And I can see solar might be a good thing to run with them. EV charging stations, just, two as an example. I'm just not sure how they are gonna actually show us savings. I would, from the presentation that they gave us, and all the millions of dollars they have to spend to save over 30 years, just, to save the amount of money that they originally showed us. We don't have the numbers, but it didn't seem to me significant. Right now, I'm working on the projects for the summer. I'm doing the same thing that they're doing. I'm going to ComEd and say, okay, here's my energy savings. I want to put new chillers in. Here's our, roofing is not, there's not any money out there for roofing unless you go energy savings and you increase your insulation. So a lot of things we're already doing, lighting upgrades. We got ComEd grants, the same thing that they would go for the payoff. We're getting the payoff for the lighting that we did at Vernon Hills High School and use their consultants. So said I'm not on some projects I could see it might work. Right now I'm not totally sold on the whole package.
Well, that speaks volumes to me.
That's a very good lens and perspective, because there are some areas here that the buildings well. You're probably already working on some of these things versus what might be an unknown to us.
And I think if Mark questions the value that Vergy brings, then that's a good point to pause.
I said, in some type of cases, some projects, they might bring us good value in projects and things that we don't know anything about.
Yeah,
Definitely like solar. EV chargers, those are areas that I've never had before, been used, done any large projects.
And although those are things that we're interested in, I'm not sure those are the top priority at this moment, unless the capital projects plan ends up showing one of those things is rising to the top. Yeah.
I still get a little confused about exactly what they would do. Because every time I feel like I understand it, I get lost again when I hear more conversations. So if you were to pick, let's say, solar as an example, and we say this is an area that is new to us, so we'd like to work with them. What specific services would they provide to us?
Under the performance service contract model and the guaranteed savings model, what they would do is they would design a project. They would design a project, they would bid it out. In control of all of those functions. And then they would write a guarantee of savings that they would expect us to have over a certain period of time. And with check-ins and everything like that. And so basically they're saying, we're going to guarantee you're going to save this much money, energy usage over this period of time. And if you don't, we're going to make up the difference, more or less.
So
I've used
effectively-
performance contracting in California for a solar project. And it was for exactly the reason Mark is talking about. Our school-based design team was not experts in that area. And so you're paying for areas where Verigy has expertise that we don't. And then the performance contract is also something that many school boards who don't have the same cash balance that we have find very appealing. This is a way for them to tackle some larger projects and show the voters that they're going to pay for themselves over time. So I think that they would still be an advantage to us, but not as much as other districts who have much more financial constraints on them.
Helpful perspective.
So they would effectively do the project, guarantee some savings. And if those savings don't come, they cover the cost of that.
Yeah.
But the savings are over 30 years, or do we start seeing something year one, year?
You'd start saying it year one.
Okay. So year one, they said you would save $100. We don't save, and we save $50, they're gonna pay us the 50. Yes.
That's in a simple way, that's how it depends on the actual terms.
Yeah.
And the numbers, but the concept is accurate.
But are there, so I'm trying to get up to speed too on understanding how they help us. Do we give them parameters of what, like if we were to say solar, there's a big difference between saying solar of both buildings and that's what we want you to do, or can we give them parameters and say we're only interested in 25% of building A, or how does that work when they're bidding out and designing the project? Do they, I don't know that we're prepared to do a full project like that, or can we give them parameters?
The owner determines the scope. We determine the scope. We determine the scope of the project we want to do. They execute it. Is that fair? I mean.
So our
I know
next roof that
oversimplified,
we're
but-
gonna talk about is just, what, 25,000 square feet? So we would say, we want to do 25,000 square feet now. We might do another 25,000 2 years from now
Yeah.
or next week, but right now we just want 25,000.
Does that answer your question?
Wasn't there a fee built in after so many years to quantify our savings? We had to pay them to do the analysis to make sure that we were making or getting the savings that we were guaranteed. There was some type of,
Yeah, that's just that's a component of the agreement. So typically what's, again, why it gets a little more complicated when you get into the specifics, but in order to find out if they've met, typically that involves somebody to do work to analyze something, and that comes at a cost. So usually that's part of the agreement as well, in terms of figuring all that kind of stuff out. So it's the same old adage, you have to spend money to save money, and you have to spend money to make sure you save money. So that's just how it works.
My last experience with this, we hired a company to do an energy audit for us. It cost us $35,000 to discover that we were using more energy than we needed to. It didn't seem to me like we got very much out of that project.
So in addition to the more money you were spending than you needed to, you paid an
We
additional
paid a
$35,000
consultant to tell us
that you were
we're
spending too
wasting
much money.
energy. And so, but that's all we got out of it. And in some ways, I think that's kind of what that investment grade audit would be, is the thing that they go through and they tell us where we could save money and how to go about saving money. So we would be paying them for that service. But then after we did that, we came back and said, all right, well, now what do we do? So what we decided to do was to try to go for LEED certification. And then that gave us very specific outlines of things that we had to do in order to gain the certification. And in a way, you can't not do any of them. Like, you have to do the whole thing. And that that just became a huge project. But over time, there was energy savings associated with it, and we could say, well, we paid for that $35,000 in consulting fees with the energy savings. And so that to me is the thing that I'm interested in, is finding out if we spend money to have this letter of interest or whatever it is, what does that get us? How does that advance us? Does it tell us anything that we don't already know? Like, I don't want to spend money that doesn't tell us anything. So that's a concern there, but sooner or later, you got to decide what's important and then pull the trigger.
Right. Or can you focus that letter of intent on the letter of intent on areas that you plan to work on? I think that's what you were, where you were going with this.
And I think that's what,
Dan's saying.
and I think that's what Verigy is interested in too. Like, they don't want to waste our time or their time.
Right.
So I think they're honestly asking, like, what do you really want to do? They're fine with whatever we want to do.
It's not just what we want to do, it's what we need.
Right. We want to really do the things that are identified as a strategic priority that move our goals forward. And I'm not sure we're there yet.
It's cyclical. Now we're back to the original. What are our priorities?
Right. Which, I mean, the point is, I'm not sure we're ready to
Right. 'Cause
spend
we're
money
still in the
on
process of
Verigy.
Putting that framework together. So what I'm hearing is maybe we're gonna wait a little bit longer before putting together any kind of letter of intent or taking the next step on this until we finish putting some framework around our capital prioritization, decision-making.
Yeah, it's a bit of a chicken and the egg kind of thing.
Sure.
But the only thing I would add to that is for you folks to keep an ear on the process. And if we get to a point where, okay, they're gonna move forward with X number of folks, and we might miss out on something because we're holding off and we didn't know about that. I think it'd be helpful to just get that feedback, all of a sudden they get 12 letters of intent by the end of December, and they're gonna run off and start doing those and leave us behind. I think we'd like to know that, just not that we would act in haste, but just to know what the process is.
Informed decision.
How many letters did they say they've gotten already? So neither of us were at the last meeting.
I only know of one for sure. But that's all I know for sure. I don't know. So there could be more, but I don't know.
Sounds like we
I
have
can find
an
out.
open line of communication with them so that,
Yeah, they
we
seem
can-
happy to talk to us.
yeah, we can continue to keep an eye on how many other folks are submitting those letters, where we are in our decision-making process. So we will continue to look for this as an update on future board meetings. And I thank you for the time.
And I would add, I think Verigy would probably be happy to work with us at whatever point we decide we're ready. I'd be surprised if there was we have to commit by the end of the year. There may be certain things I'd be surprised if there was a hard and fast deadline, but they'd probably be happy to work with our timeline.
We'd be giving them better information if we waited and worked through our own process of how we're making these decisions, so that we're arriving at the projects that have come out of this as our priorities. So we will continue to see updates on this.
I'm hoping that Danielle and Michelle are watching right now. So that they can, they've got a list of questions they're researching for us right now.
There you
So
go.
if you're out there.
One of the recommendations is that, we join a cooperative purchasing program called TIPS, which we're already a member, and we're a member of 5 other organizations that we purchase from using cooperative purchasing. So
Right.
we're doing things that they're suggesting is, to get things done.
Good.
And do competitively, and we're doing a lot of those things right now.
And that feeds into what we talked about last time we talked about this, like some of the information they got back to us was affirming that some of the things that we've already been talking about and looking at, we're on the right track. So
Right.
just goes to the point of some of that was confirming what we've been working on anyways. So
Yeah, the monitoring system, the new boilers, they were you guys are doing the right thing.
Yeah. Having been on the board for several years and gone through several very large capital projects since I've been here, I can unequivocally say that we take the right steps and that our team is definitely well-educated and knows what they're doing with these projects, so. Anybody else? Are we ready to move on? Okay. ESER 3, update.
This is a quick one. It was really tied to Title I when we were stepping back and looking at everything. We were trying to see if there's a synergy that ESER 3 money and Title I could have together, that they wouldn't be able to have apart. And so we had ESER 3 funding figured out. But some of those things that we put in our plan didn't end up costing as much as we thought they would. So the interventionist that we paid for and the HVAC project came in less than we thought. And so there's about $96,000-ish that is still available to us under ESER 3 for until September 2024. And so we were kind of pausing on that to see about Title I. Is there something we could do with Title I and ESER 3? But it seems at this point, Title I is better with that plan better set to do something different, because that is annual money versus this ESER 3 money is one-time money, essentially. And so one-time money that you really have until September 2024 to use. And so because that didn't happen in terms of like, we didn't find the synergy there, we're going to continue a process to figure out what to do with that other $96,000. And so we're going to put together a community stakeholder group to look at that and develop a plan really from the ground up together. So that's the update I wanted to give you on that. It's been on our future agenda for a little bit time now. And so we had them together, but now ESER 3 and Title I are going to be separate.
And can you just, for everybody's benefit, remind us what ESER 3 funds can be used on?
ESER 3 funds, the original amount, whatever you get, no less than 20% can be used on either what it's called either learning loss or lost instructional time. You can use more, but you can't use less than 20%. Our plan called for essentially that 20% to be used on interventionists, SEL interventionists, math interventionists, and then the rest we used for an HVAC project for increased ventilation HVAC in this building. So that's what the money can be used for. The remainder of this amount, because some of that money was for addressing learning loss or lost instructional time, I'm strongly recommending we just put all of that money towards that, or to keep it simple. So, because $96,000 is not a little bit amount of money, but I don't want to treat it like it's $96 million either, and come up with something that's overly complicated.
And I also want to make it clear that for anyone listening in the public, we're not spending $96,000 on a new tennis court. That's not what these funds are
You
for.
cannot. It is only money that can be used. Sorry, ESER 3 is COVID relief money. It's money's used to respond, prepare for the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you.
Okay, sounds like we have a little bit of a runway to make that decision, so. Okay, we will look forward to updates on that. Anything else on that? Moving on to fiscal year 23 state maintenance project grant.
I didn't think this was going to be an annual thing, but it seems to turn more into, the state, again, is offering $50,000 matching grants to districts. The deadline is November 18th, I believe, to get these submitted to the state. And so you have to do a project that it's at least $100,000 because it's a matching grant up to $50,000. And so you have to identify a project. There's a prioritization they go through: emergency projects, health, life, safety projects, state priority projects, which one of them is energy savings. The other one, I cannot remember off the top of my head. And then permanent improvement projects. The last projects that we've done have been under permanent improvements. The last one we did was for roofing, and because we have a lot of roofs that are scheduled or that are up for review. And so last meeting, we said that we would come with a proposal for you, and this is the proposal that we have. you see an attachment there for Vernon Hills roof number 16. That's a project that Mark has identified to go this summer. That's not the only project looking for this summer, but that's one that he feels is one that is for sure something that we're gonna need to be doing. This also has to be, for the state maintenance grant project. It cannot be something that we've already started work on or that we've obligated to. So basically you can't use this for a project that you're already doing. The intention of this is to be a catalyst for additional projects. So in order for us to access that money, this is the project that we've identified that we're going to be doing, that we're going to be recommending for us to do this summer. And this project would align with that. So
Mark, how old is that section of roof? Just out of curiosity.
It's original to the building, so it'd be 22, 23 years old. It's the main section going north-south on the east end of the building. So we were trying to work our way around the building, replacing roofs. Looked at the research on our roofs and our leak tags that we've called in. And this roof, we've had several calls in the last couple of years on that. So I changed things around. So we'll replace this roof because of, we are seeing more leaks than any other place on the building.
Okay,
So that made this roof priority number one, to stop any future damage it could happen from water infiltration.
right.
Is that the roof that's got all the rocks on it?
The whole building has rocks on it except for a fly tower and the new sections we replaced. So what they did is they call it's a weight ballast. So basically you're just attached around the top of the wall all the way around and the rocks hold the roof in place. The roof is just floating. It's not glued down. All the new roofs that we're doing now, we're bringing up to code our insulation. And then we are doing an applied surface, which is glued to it, which takes that weight off, which then we can talk to engineers to see if we can support solar in the future.
Does the new kind of roof have a longer lifespan than 20 years?
It's about the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one thing's for sure with roofs, if you let them go too long, they're gonna wind up costing you a lot more money than if you repaired it when you noticed a small problem.
Yeah, well, what we're seeing now is the prices have doubled. We were paying $33, not last year before, now we're at 66
Wow.
and going up.
well, and
So we could do twice as many roofs as we're gonna be doing, that would. For instance, example, we're doing $1 million, we could have done 2 roofs for $1 million. Now we're only getting 1 roof.
Right.
and just for context, so yes, if you waited long, it's expensive, especially if you have to replace it all at once. With 240,000 square foot of roof, that's a lot of roof to replace all at once, but this section would be like 24,000 square feet-ish, so you're talking like it's about 10% of the roof, so we're starting this cycle that's gonna be there, it's been in our long-term capital plan of like, it's gonna take a while to replace all of these roofs.
And other than the area over the gym, this is the second largest section in the building.
Solid section, yeah.
Yeah. Which is
All
great.
Part of maintaining aging assets. So.
How do you eat an elephant? One bit at a time. This is the section right next to the new addition, right?
Yes.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Those roofs are brand new though. It's built.
All right, you'll keep us apprised on that grant and the process.
This will come for approval at our meeting a week from today, so it requires
Okay.
board approval to
Alright,
move
so
forward with the plan. It doesn't guarantee that we're gonna spend this, it will start the process for us to do that, so it's even
Right.
approving this grant does not obligate you to spend this money, it's just a procedure in order to file the grant. So.
Important details. Okay.
Mhm.
Moving on to future agenda items. There's quite a few on here. The ones I'm going to point out are next week's board meetings, public hearing on the 2020 tax levy, as well as board adoption of the 2022 tax levy.
Can I ask Dan, is that when we have to disclose the cash reserve balances?
Good question. And then we will also be approving the fiscal year 2023 state maintenance project grant so that you can start that process. Any other future agenda items anyone wants to add? All right, that adjourns facilities and finance at 8:18.
Okay, great. Tonight we will be convening in special session. That will be for the purpose of discussing security procedures 5 ILCS 120/2C8. This is just an update to the board on current procedures. When we move to reconvene in open session, we will then adjourn. So should we do a 5-minute break before we convene? Yeah. Okay, so that team will convene, let's call it 8:25.
Currently on break. 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 Currently on break.
Okay, we will convene in closed session at 8:25.
We gotta go
What do we
into
have to do?
regular session first.
Oh,
We
right,
have to
all right.
open the meeting.
Well, what would I do without all of my colleagues? So what are we doing first?
We are calling the meeting to order.
Calling,
And roll
thank
call.
you. Excellent, thank you. I need to just get to the agenda, and that will fix my confusion. Thank you. Okay, it is now 8:26. We're gonna call the special meeting to order. We do need to have roll call, please.
Jim Batson,
Here.
Kara Benjamin.
It's
excuse
okay,
me.
here.
Don Carmichael,
Here.
Kara Drumkey,
Here.
Lisa Hessel,
Here.
Sonalco Carney.
Here.
Casey Rooney.
Here.
Great, we note all members present. Do we have anybody who would like to make public comment? Seeing none, can I have a motion to convene in closed session for the purpose of discussing security procedures 5 ILCS 120/2C8?
Carmichael, so moved.
Thank you.
Batson second.
Great. Any discussion? Seeing none, we will. Can we do voice vote?
We do a roll call.
Roll call going? Okay, roll call, please.
Kara Benjamin.
Aye.
Sorry. Carmichael,
Aye.
Drumkey,
Aye.
Hessel.
Aye.
Kulkarni,
Aye.
Rooney.
Aye.
Batson.
Aye.
Great, we are now convened in closed session at 8:27.